Hey everyone, this is Chris coming from the editing room. Just wanted to give you a heads up. The audio quality is a little bit different this week. We had a guest, which was super exciting, and that meant that I had to set up my two microphone setup in a different room, which was closer to a window, and it was really hot, so I kept the fan running, and I had not used the double microphones before, so the levels are a little bit weird. Everything's still listenable. There's not like aggressive background noise, but if you notice a difference in the sound quality, that's what's up. I'll be back to using my regular setup on future episodes when we don't have an actual, for lack of a better term, in-studio guest. And in the meantime, I'll work on improving my game and my audio knowledge to make that smoother next time we do have an in-person guest. But without further ado, enjoy this week's episode. Enjoy our guest, and this one was really fun. I hope you like it. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Backstage Gaming, dramatic takes on your favorite games. I'm Chris.
I'm Dylan.
And we are here to talk with a guest this week. We finally managed to pin down a friend of ours to come in and have a conversation with us. So we're joined this week by our friend Will. Will, say hi to everyone.
Hey, everyone.
Will is a friend of ours from school. He is also... I was about to list off everything you do, and I realized I don't even know if I know everything that you do. So, Will, why don't you talk a little bit about what you are and how you do in this world?
Well, from about 2014 to 2016, I was an Uber driver. It was a fine gig. No, I am a theatrical director and playwright with a focus on plays for middle schoolers. And then I have more recently become a architecture photographer and masonry expert, focusing on brick, and specifically the brick in Chicago.
Will runs... It started out as
a weird little passion project. I designed a tour for an organization around noticing the world, and I started to just notice that in Chicago we have a lot of similar building layouts, but the brick that covers them is usually the thing that gives them their distinctive look. And so I started noticing those textures, and I took pictures, and then while Chris and I were working at the same summer camp, asked people if they would follow an account, and then almost 3 years ago this coming week, I started the page Brick of Chicago.
We gave you a lot of crap for it.
A lot of crap
it was really
for it.
Goofy.
Some of our coworkers from that summer didn't start following me for a couple months because they thought it was just a joke. And I started posting photos, and that led to me feeling like I should probably know what I'm doing, and that led to a lot of research that is...
See me in podcasting.
Yeah, exactly.
That's amazing.
And so there's still a ton of research. I just discovered that through the Chicago Public Library, you can get a free subscription to JSTOR, the online journal storage. And so last weekend, I downloaded about 15 different JSTOR articles on bricks and learned a bunch more from that. Yeah, it's a wild... you pick any one thing, and you can really discover a ton of stuff you had no idea was there. I picked brick.
It's actually really funny you mentioned that, because yesterday was my mother's birthday, and so she took the family to a fancy restaurant for us to eat. And my cousin, she was paying attention to the wooden paneling on the roof, and was... I don't remember the term she used, but apparently it's repurposed wood from old farmhouses and stuff.
Nice.
And that's
really cool.
A great demand for that, and it gives it that rustic feel. So it's just kind of funny that I'm going from wood paneling to bricks.
Well, the same thing happens with brick. If you build a new building or a new restaurant and you want brick, a lot of times what you get is they take the bricks that are made from the Chicago soil, which are called Chicago Commons, which are red to pink to yellow and just have a ton of beautiful character to them. And they made them from about 1870 to 1980, and they reclaim those and they'll reuse them in new buildings to give them that already lived in feel, that very rustic feel.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
Okay.
So welcome to our Brick podcast.
Yeah.
We are going to sort of take advantage of both Will's attention to detail and time spent looking at kind of the stories that are told by buildings in the real world, but also Will's experience as a director and coming up with how to tell stories on a stage. And we're going to use that to talk about how environments can be used to tell stories, and how in things like, let me put it this way, in a novel, especially something like fantasy or sci-fi, if you read George R.R. Martin or
Arthur C. Clarke,
J.R.R. Tolkien, I'm embarrassed because I'm blanking on the author who wrote Dune.
Frank Herbert.
Frank Herbert. I was thinking
thank
Herbert
you,
Miller,
thank
and
you.
I'm like, that's not even remotely right.
Herbert Hoover.
Yes, President
Yes,
Herbert
of
Hoover,
course.
famed author of Dune. They
imagine?
spend so much time describing the scenery in
Yeah.
verbose detail. You know, George R.R. Martin's descriptions of feasts are almost comical in
Feasts
how long.
and penises for
Yep, there you
George.
go. That's all George wants.
What a feast.
But when you move into mediums that don't allow that much text, so plays, films,
Yeah.
especially games, you don't have the ability to go off on a paragraph tangent about like, oh, he knew that this building was the hollowed out shell of the church that he visited when he was a kid or whatever.
Yeah.
And so they have to lean into visual shorthand. They have to lean into telling a lot of that backstory that a lot of stories tell verbally through how the environments look and
Yeah.
grounding that in sometimes the real world, sometimes just accepted knowledge about like, oh, it's a sci-fi movie. That means that things are going to look a certain way.
Well, and so much of it comes to with how people interact with each other. You know, something I just taught a 2-week playwriting camp with middle schoolers, and, you know, most of them are reading novels, but none of them have written a play before. And the thing a lot of them will do is they write copious stage directions describing the inner thoughts of the characters. And
Oh,
which,
boy.
which I tell them, you know, that's great. That's great to know, but the audience doesn't know that. So you have to see, how do people engage with each other? How do people interact? How do people choose what to do and respond to things? And I think you see that in video games a lot in terms of like how powered your character is compared to another character, and you know the levels you need to grind or the things you need to do. Or, you know, we were talking about Horizon Zero Dawn. That's a game that has such incredible relationship building and is very clear about how you interact with people in various ways.
This just popped into my head.
Sure.
I do not have much directing experience. I took a directing course in college.
Yeah.
And, like, I've done some voice directing, but that is the extent of it. But one thing that just popped into my head, and I was like, maybe we can go with this. One of the few things that I remember very clearly from that directing class was a discussion of when you're laying out a stage, building obstacles into the scenery.
Yeah.
So, for example, you know, there's the constant thing of like, if a scene is about somebody who wants to leave and doesn't, obviously, for one thing, they don't actually want to leave
Yeah.
because otherwise they would just walk off the stage. But what can you put into the stage? What can you put there furniture-wise or wall-wise or actual physical obstacles that give the people on stage things to move around with? And then my mind went to, like, a Mario level.
Sure,
Super Mario
yeah.
Maker 2 just came
Naturally.
out.
We
This
can't
is
escape-
topical.
We can't escape this video game hell.
Well, you see it too in like, because I often think in terms of like people on stage as the obstacles. You know, there's physical things keeping them there, but there's also the people there, and making sure every character on stage has a connection of a particular kind with every other person on stage, that they are feeling something towards and drawn or repulsed in some way. And that, yeah, it's similar to Mario. That makes me think of like a BioShock Infinite, where you've got that character who what's her name, Elizabeth,
Elizabeth, I think,
Elizabeth,
yeah.
yeah, who's following you the whole time, and a game where you've got to get someone somewhere. You know, that person is your obstacle, and you know it becomes comical in the ways of when that character moves faster than your walking speed and slower than your running speed. You know, but in cases
Unintentional obstacle on the part of the game
God,
designer.
exactly. But in a case like BioShock Infinite is so great because as you become more comfortable with her and she becomes more comfortable with you, she stops being an obstacle and starts being an ally and someone you can use and who can help you in that way.
That made me then again make another logical leap. And Dylan, you can talk too. I feel like we're
No, I know. No, this is fascinating. I'm listening because Will is doing my work for me.
There you go. Dylan just gets to put his feet up and take a break for this week's
Right,
episode.
yeah.
No, I have a couple things to contribute later, but like right now,
Yeah.
this is good stuff.
Yeah. That put me in mind of another game that, Will, you brought up right before we started recording, of Portal 2.
Yeah.
And the way that not only are the Portal games just great in terms of like their level design is very iconic looking. It's all like stark white walls and sort of self-assembling
Sterile.
obstacles, and like you immediately know when you're looking at a screenshot from Portal if you've
Yeah.
ever seen anything from that
Yeah.
game. But specifically Portal 2, in the way that the co-op levels work. There's an entire campaign you can go through that is a 2-player mode that
I've never done that.
oh, it's really good.
I've played a little bit of it. It's really fun.
It's phenomenal because not only does that mean that they're able to build more complex puzzles because you have 2 sets of portals to be working with.
Each player has their own portals.
Each player has their own portal gun. So they're able to build a lot more complex things that really require coordination on the part of the player. But then that in and of itself, it plays out like those moments that you're talking about on stage with 2 people that are trying to work together, but also like sometimes it's 2 a.m. and you're playing with your friend who's kind of a jerk and he doesn't he decides to just be an asshole for 20 minutes.
And that's the kind of co-op I love. That's the kind of multiplayer I love. I've really struggled with another game, this new Super Smash Brothers. As my roommate has it and is really good at it, and I like it. But when I play with him, he's just so good that if we're like doing a co-op together, he's just killing all of them.
Hey Dylan, do you want to call out post one of your friends from home?
Yeah, I knew you were looking at me. I could feel your gaze from Chicago.
Tell us your pain, Dylan. Tell us your pain.
Well, no, see, I'm the good one.
You're the good one. But yeah, I mean, I love cooperative games like that where you each hold a slightly different piece that needs to be put together, because that is that is just like a play, just like a stage relationship. Each person needs something from someone else, and the game can't be won, the play can't be over until they've either achieved that or failed spectacularly enough that they need something else. And I don't know, to stay on the tack of world building, I think both Portal 1 and Portal 2 do some of the best of that I've seen. I think when I first played Portal 1, I knew it was a cool game and that people loved, but I didn't know enough about it where I knew the twist was coming at all. And so I was like, okay, well, this is just kind of a brief narrative around this puzzle game. And then when you're about to get dumped into the flames and suddenly you go behind everything,
it's exquisite.
It's incredible because they've built this very clear world, and then they've done an incredible job of building this behind the scene worlds. And they do, and Portal 2 spells it out even further with the found audio clips and the found recordings. And in Portal 1 you have a lot of like writing on the wall, which the famous "the cake is a lie."
Yeah. And so much of that is like the way they used Ellen McLean's performance as GLaDOS.
Yeah.
And like setting it up as like, oh, these are all canned recordings, and then when they pull the rug out from under you and it's not.
Exactly.
And then again the use of I can never remember the actor's name, J. Jonah Jameson from Sam Raimi's Spider-Man.
Starts with it. I'm looking it up now.
Yeah, if you hadn't forgotten, I would have absolutely been able to tell you.
Oh,
but because you forgot, my brain was like, you should forget that too.
But like that,
J.K. Simmons.
Thank you, J.K. Simmons. His performance in Portal 2 as like the founder of this this lab.
Exactly.
So much great work.
Well, and in Portal 2 they do such a great job at like graphic and industrial design as well, as you go from Aperture Science being this very utopian, streamlined, sleek, beautiful place with
everything's perfectly spaced white tiles.
Exactly, perfect. To you watching it slowly fall apart, and you watch how the design changes over the decades. It feels kind of like Westworld in that way, and the parallels there go deeper. But they do a really great job at changing the design in subtle ways to show you the changing mind of the creator of Aperture Science.
And then when it goes away from him and ends up in GLaDOS's hands.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
It's those little things that just create that deeper investment.
Yeah. That's kind of the cool thing about this is like a lot of what the games we've been talking about, Portal, had they not done any of that, Portal would still be a great puzzle game. Like
it'd be fun. It'd be fun.
The core mechanics are engaging enough that like all of this stuff that we're talking about to a certain degree is extraneous to like the actual mechanical enjoyment of the game.
Yeah.
But it does so much to make the world feel like a more real place, which does so much more to draw you in beyond just the pure like puzzle solving aspect.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That this is the kind of stuff that takes Portal from being like, this is a cool idea of a puzzle game to a game that is still being talked about 10, 11 years after it came out.
Well, to me, it's like, Snipper Clippers.
Which is so good.
It's such a fun game. I'd always recommend it. And it's a good diversion, but it's similar in that it's this co-op thing where you have to think creatively, but it doesn't have a narrative in the way that Portal does. That really makes Portal so much more.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Snipperclips has a wonderful aesthetic that
Oh,
makes
yeah.
it a fun game to look, and like it's a feel good game, but like you're saying, the coupling of Portal's narrative with all of this attention to detail in the environment.
Though if we're talking about Snipperclips makes me think about it's purely aesthetic. Something I think that Nintendo has done such a great job of, and I think to the Wii, growing up, I wasn't allowed to have any video game systems. We got, we borrowed a neighbor's N64 for probably about 4 years.
Nice long borrow.
My brother took it to college. Yeah. Whoops. Daniel Olson, if you're out there, I apologize. Fun fact about Daniel Olson: me and my brothers, when we were young idiots, we did a bad Pokemon trade, and he gave us his Charizard, and we went back and bragged to my dad, and my dad, being the good father he was, made us go back and give it back. But the only time I would really play video games was when I would go play at my friend Theo's house, and we would play Wii, and we would play that like Wario game pack. I don't know exactly what it was.
Oh, I don't remember what
Was
the
it,
Wii one was called. It was one of the
WarioWare or
WarioWare
WarioLand?
games.
I think probably that, yeah. But I see it now with the Switch too. They've done such a great job at creating this like very light aesthetic, this very fun thing that's like, hey, this is not Horizon Zero Dawn. This isn't this huge game engine with this huge world building, but this is super easy to get into, and the aesthetic is light, and the instructions are clear, and you're just going to have fun doing this.
Yes. I think one of my favorite things about playing the original WarioWare is
it's so fun.
how the levels are, or rather the mini games are kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? They're segmented. They're kind of placed into their own category,
Yeah.
and each category kind of has its own framing device, which kind of informs the type of mini games that you'll be playing.
Yep, and each category is then overseen by like a character MC with a very clear sort of genre aesthetic. There's like the guy with the big blue afro and the disco V-neck, and then there's the like, I don't remember any of these characters'
There's
names,
Mona
but
Pizza. She's like a pizza delivery girl.
Dylan's got names.
There's
Every
the-
Yeah, I got you.
There's Kat and Anna, the two ninja girls. There's like, they did such a great job
9
of like,
volt.
even in this like goofy party game where like the games all look like Monty Python opening animations.
Yes.
They still took the time to think about what are the personalities of the characters we're putting in here, and what kinds of games would each of them be overseeing.
It creates investment. It creates investment.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of, is there a game that does a really bad job at world building? Or
I'm sure there are, but I'm not going to be able to think of any immediately.
I don't want to burn any bridges.
well, I mean, I guess the one that comes to mind has already burned their own bridge, but I guess Mass Effect Andromeda
That's
Yep.
fair.
was
Talk to us about Mass Effect Andromeda.
Mass Effect is sort of the first, when I left college and got a video game system. Well, I didn't get one. My roommate had one. Kip Clark, who we all know, recommended Mass Effect, and I got it and really enjoyed it because there's such a distinct world and world building.
We talked actually a little bit last week about Mass Effect because we were talking about like kind of flashbulb game moments for us, and for me it was one of the like payoff moments in Mass Effect 3 involving the choices made in the previous games. Just like,
man, Mass Effect 3 is, I've gone back and played that one maybe two or three times. Mass Effect 2, I like started another playthrough and was like, well, I don't know, you have to mine so much, and building the team is kind of boring. But Mass Effect 3 does a really incredible job, and so when it's like Mass Effect Andromeda, yes, I'm excited for this. But then they went from this idea of open world building to every planet is just kind of the same puzzles over and over again. So there's not really any new stuff. There's not any new terrains, any new world building as you go. And there isn't the same amount of, there's not the Citadel. There's not, maybe there is later on. I really didn't get very far because the controls were also very confusing. And, it's a really unfortunate end to a great series.
Yeah, and from what I'd heard development-wise, I think that it had a pretty messy development cycle. It was
did,
very
yeah.
rushed.
There's a great long-form piece, I don't remember where it was, Alex sent it to me, but about the development and how they just pulled a lot of money from it and started taking people off the team and moving it over to Anthem.
Yeah.
Which
also had a really rough development cycle.
Yeah, that did not do them any good.
Yeah.
The Mass Effect game is actually it's a fun segue into an idea I had for sort of the latter portion of the show.
We're about like 24 minutes in.
Okay, perfect. That seems like a good time to head to the playbill. Will,
Okay.
for you, that is, we take a minute in the middle to talk about other things that are going on.
Amazing.
Plug stuff, and yeah, so we'll do that now. I'll probably cut this explanation out.
Great.
In the editing room.
Then I will say, fart.
Now it has. Well, now we have to keep it. Thanks, Will. So to start with, Will, what do you have going on? Where can people find stuff about you? Plug your shit.
Well, I don't think I've said it yet, but I'm on Instagram at Brick of Chicago, Brick singular of Chicago, and online at www.brickofchicago.com. I lead architecture tours, of course, with an emphasis on the brick. I sort of have a trio set up currently right now of Pulaski Park and Noble Square in Chicago, which feature beautiful Victorian-era brick and sort of the early industrialization of brick. And then Rogers Park as well in the north end of Chicago, which is the 20s, which I consider like the height of innovation in brick and brick building. And then finally, a new one I'm going to run probably on August 10th. Here is in the Fulton Market District, which is a beautiful old historic warehouse district that's now really become sort of this very bougie new restaurant area. And so you have a real great mix of historic industrial brick use, but also these new brick buildings that are going in that are doing really innovative things with brick that also tie into the culture and nature of the area. So those are my current three trios of tours. So look out for those.
Yeah, anyone who's in the Chicagoland area should definitely look into those. I have not been able to go on one yet because scheduling is difficult.
Come on, you got a free ticket. You got a free
yo,
ticket
buddy,
anytime
next
you want to
time I'm
come.
in Chicago.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll be checking one of those out. And really do follow Brick of Chicago on Instagram. It's a weird thing to think would be really engaging, but like the close-ups that Will gets of like the brick layouts and
I mean, it's a window into history,
Yeah.
from what
Yeah.
I'm hearing. At least I'm learning about this today.
it's
but,
delightful.
It's
really cool.
people have said it's very soothing, which I can see. Yeah.
It's a very just like you're scrolling through Instagram and you'll come across just like a nice symmetrically laid out like little snippet of brick with a caption about why it's laid out this way
Yeah.
and what these bricks are about, and it's delightful.
They've all got stories.
Dylan, you know a lot more about anime than I do,
it's true, I do.
and you recently have been doing more projects with that. Why don't you tell me where I can find your musings about a specific semi-obscure early 80s mecha anime?
Hell yeah.
All right, so I'll keep this brief. So I am doing a series with your friend and mine, Chris. Actual Dojin character Coop.
That was the weirdest Twitter thread I've ever been a part of, and I hated it. I was just trying to spread some love to the voice acting community on Twitter, and Coop comes in with like, "I'm in Japanese porn," and then you're like, yes, you are."
Okay. Doujinshi is not always Japanese porn. It just means self-published comic.
Oh, really?
That's an important distinction.
Okay, that is an important distinction.
But you
that I
also
wasn't
did
aware
say not always, which implies that sometimes too often it is.
It is known in the Western consciousness as porn.
of. Anyway,
Anyway.
hi
Anywho.
Dylan's parents. Hi, my younger siblings.
Oh God, they listen to
Yep,
this.
they
don't
do.
they?
Tell us about your podcast.
Fart.
Yeah,
There we
okay,
go.
well, I wanted to keep this brief. So, yes, we talk about this old, semi-obscure 80s, due to copyright issues and whatnot. It is an 80s anime called Super Dimensional Fortress Macross, and on this show, we talk about it, we examine it as a work of sci-fi, as a romance story, and, like, how it kind of tackles this conflict between military lifestyle and culture and pop culture. And it's a cocktail of a lot of interesting ideas, and we kind of examine how they're explored and if they're explored as well as we'd like them to be. And it's a fun time. So if you want to check that out, that is going to be at anchor.fm/dude, that is DUDE, you remember. We are also on Spotify, Google Play, and Apple Podcasts, and you can also check us out on social media at facebook.com/dudeyouRemember and Twitter at dudeyouRemember.
You should also go and show some love to our friends over at the Unexplored Places podcast. It's an actual play podcast run by our friend Christine. They recently wrapped season 1, which is phenomenal. It's a great monster story season that they did. We're getting prepped for season 2, which is going to involve both me and Dylan as player characters, which
Sweet.
we're both really excited for. And there's also a bunch of Patreon exclusive stuff that we've been doing with them. They're making some really great stuff in the actual play world, so you can find them on Twitter at unexploredcast or at unexploredcast.libsyn.com. One thing I'm really excited about, there's an audio drama podcast, I plug it here every week, called Unwell, a Midwestern Gothic mystery. It is one of the coolest audio dramas I've been listening to recently, and I was lucky enough to be cast for a very minor part in the final episode, which is releasing in 2 or 3 weeks.
Sweet.
I think I'm also have one line in the background of episode 11, which is coming out this coming week, I want to say.
What's the line? Give us a preview.
I honestly don't remember. It's something about being really excited to be at the Celery Festival.
At the Celery Festival.
The Celery Festival.
Okay.
It's honestly, even if I wasn't involved, I would be saying that it is one of the coolest audio dramas being produced right now. They're doing a lot of cool stuff in the editing room. Actually, another mutual friend of ours, Hannah Ferschler, did the sound design for the last episode to come out, I think, episode 9 or 10.
Amazing.
But it's a phenomenal show, and you should definitely check it out. They're on Twitter at Unwell Podcast, I believe. Yes, Unwell Podcast. And you can also find them wherever you get your podcasts. And as always, we just want to say thank you to everyone who supports us on Patreon. Your support is awesome. We don't have to spend any money to keep this show running, which is incredible, and really was the big goal when we set up the Patreon. So thank you guys for being awesome and helping us not go into the red, making this weird little passion project that we like to do. If you want to help us out, we've got some different Patreon rewards, like a Discord server, and we've got some blooper reel episodes coming out soon, as well as a bonus episode on the 3 Unities that you guys voted on, because you're apparently as big theater nerds as we are.
Can't wait to tackle that.
It's going to be a weird one.
What are they? They're time, place, and character?
Story.
Time,
or
place,
Unity of
story.
plot, I think,
Unity
is
of plot.
the technical term.
Sure.
So you can find that at patreon.com/bsgpod. If you want to support us, that's awesome. If you don't, that's fine. Maybe if you like us and don't just don't feel like throwing money, tell your friends about us. I think that's all we have for that. Really do check out Brick of Chicago on Instagram. It's a delight. It's my favorite thing of opening Instagram most of the time, because
Thanks, man.
the rest of my Instagram is just people showing off things that they're doing that are cooler than what I'm doing. So
Well, that sounds like a backhanded compliment.
I mean, a little bit, but
We hopping back in, boys?
yes,
hop back in.
We're just gonna talk about some specific settings and some specific screenshots from games and look at how they are using all of these things that we've been talking about with environmental storytelling in practice, and what they're doing with that. Let's look at a game that we've talked about already, but honestly, a really iconic scene or setting in this game.
Yeah.
The bridge of the Starship Normandy in
Yeah.
the Mass Effect series.
Yeah.
It's great. It's 100% just a pastiche of science fiction
Yeah.
imagery. But really, that's what a lot of this kind of stuff is.
Yeah.
When you're putting together a scene that is meant to be evocative to an audience, all you have to work with is stuff they already know.
Well, and that makes me think of taking set design in college.
Yeah.
And I don't know, remember, we read something about how, you can do as much research as, I think this is in the Robert Edmonds book, which is the name I can't remember right now, but it doesn't matter what the reality of a design should be, what 12th century Scotland really looks like. People have an expectation of what Scotland looks like and what Macbeth should look like.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what you need to play to, And so for a game like Mass Effect, that's making me think of Commander Worf's or Lieutenant Worf's weapons console in Star Trek The Next Generation.
You've got this big open world with consoles lining the walls.
Yeah.
You've got a map of the galaxy floating there as a hologram. It's very Star Trek. Mass Effect's trying to be very Star Trek,
Yeah.
and so that makes a lot of sense.
Well, all those consoles make me think very much of Star Wars and the leading up to the firing of the Death Star
Yep.
and just those trenches with the computers in them.
which itself is drawing on real world consciousness. Like Star Wars did that because Star Wars was being produced in the decade immediately after the moon landing, in which people had been watching on television for the first time, watching the control room at NASA.
Yeah.
And so they
50
were able
years
to,
ago today. 50 years ago today, friends.
So they were able to build that on this new understanding of what space management, for lack of a better term, looks like. And they were able to just take that idea and dress it up in Star Wars, and then that has since influenced all of the sci-fi imagery that has come since.
And it makes it so much easier to engage with the game that much faster. Or, you know, this game doesn't really do that, but if you think about set design or something, you can, if you play on that, you can bring people in, set up an expectation, and then subvert it or change it. You know, you're gonna have this beautiful home, and then some, I don't know, crazy shit's gonna happen to it or something.
Yeah, I recently saw here in Chicago The Children at Steppenwolf. I don't know if you got to see that.
I did not know.
It's a play about the basic premise is, what if Fukushima happened in like the English countryside?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so it follows this older couple who worked at this nuclear power plant, and they are now dealing with nuclear fallout. And its set design was incredible because it was like they built this one-room cabin with like the front cut away so we could look into it.
Yeah.
But it was like ever so slightly off. Like the perspective was just like played with just a little bit in the way that it was set up, which we see all of the trappings of like kind of provincial rural life for an upper class family. But from the minute you walk in, something is slightly wrong.
Something is wrong.
And that's another really great thing that you can do with this idea of playing to what the audience already knows about.
Todd Rosenthal's set for the Christmas Carol at the Goodman does a really great job of that as well. Scrooge's house is this very gothic building that we can see inside of all these huge pointed arches, but it's forced perspective where the right side is enormous, and then the left side, everything just tapers and skews
that's really
down.
cool.
Yeah, it's very...
Actually, I still have yet to see the Goodman's Christmas Carol.
It's fine.
That's kind of what I've heard.
That set description makes me think of like Dr. Caligari.
Very German expressionist.
Yeah.
Like everything's off on purpose. Dylan, you said you had an image to share?
Yeah, okay. So I guess it's time now. So I wanted to talk about like story in the scenery. So I've been playing through Silent Hill 2
Very
for the
good.
first time.
Oh yes.
And
I have played it. I have never beaten it because I am a scaredy cat.
Yeah, I'm not going anywhere near that.
I don't typically play horror games, but one of my friends who was super into horror games was like, all right, yeah, but we're playing Silent Hill 2 though.
And you said, why do you hate me?
Yeah, well, it's actually, that's the weird thing. Silent Hill 2 isn't a very scary game. Most of the horror is from
Will and I just gave each other a look like, oh.
Are you sure? Hey Dylan.
Well, okay.
Hey Dylan. Are you sure?
Okay, let me rephrase this. So I've played a lot of Resident Evil, and I love Resident Evil, but there's also this feeling of dread when it comes to playing Resident Evil because like there is such a fear of failure in those games. Silent Hill 2 so far has felt a lot more forgiving, actually.
Okay. So it's not as mechanically frightening for you.
Okay, yes.
Okay.
I guess to further like go into the difference between these two games, Silent Hill 2, it's not so much scary. There's not a whole lot of jump scares, like so much as like there's this feeling of unpleasantness and that things are not right. In Resident Evil, you fear death. In Silent Hill 2,
Yes, I do. In fact.
well, yes.
Thank you for telling me.
But like in Silent Hill 2, like obviously there is the fear of death, but like you have a lot more, I don't want to say agency, but like death feels easier to avoid. Like you don't feel like you have to be a master of the mechanics to keep yourself alive in Silent Hill 2.
Right.
So most of the fear is actually just trying to navigate the space.
Okay.
And so, you know, you are for those who don't know what Silent Hill is, basically every game is its own story, and you are exploring what is essentially a ghost town that is overrun by demons or like demon-esque creatures or otherwise horrible beasties, and sometimes they represent your subconscious, and that's that's pleasant.
Yeah, famously, in Silent Hill 2, there's the main
don't
sort of
spoil it now.
antagonistic character of Pyramid Head,
Mm-hmm.
who is very much is intended as a manifestation of the main character's like suppressed sexuality and like masculine insecurities.
Yes. So I've kind of beaten around the bush long enough, but so yes, you're going around this ghost town, and it is shrouded in fog, and there is not a single soul left there, and that alone is eerie. But on top of that, there is a lot of improbable space. There was one segment where I was walking down a street, and then I loaded into the next zone, and instead of a street, it was like this weird kind of black void, and there wasn't
that's
a
relaxing.
floor. There wasn't a floor. There was like, I think it was like a chain link fence that I was walking on, but like it was oriented so that it was the floor, it was the ground, and you're just kind of doing that. There's another part where like you're exploring an apartment complex, and eventually the only way left to go once you've thoroughly explored it is there's a key that will take you on to the fire escape. And so you're like, all right, I'm expecting to explore. It's either the fire escape or like the roof of like the building. And so you open this door thinking that's where you're going to be. But when you open the door, there's another building like right there. And so instead of going to where you thought you were going to go, you actually climb into this next building. It completely messes with like the schematics of the map that you are reading and what you expect
That's
of the space
really
in your
cool.
head.
Yeah, it completely disorients you.
Yeah, it was such a bait and switch. I had no expectation of it. It completely came out of nowhere. And the game is like full of moments like that. And according to my friend, where I'm at, it only gets more crazy from there.
That's awesome.
There was last night I was playing it. There was a stairway that takes so long to go down. I actually thought it might have been like the Super Mario 64 Infinite stairway. And so I thought to turn around, but then that took so long, so I'm like, wait, no, maybe it is like an actual stairway, it's just really long. And so there was like a solid 2 minutes of like doubt as I was going back and forth on this stairway, seemingly never reaching the bottom.
They're effectively
That's so cool.
creating doubt and madness in you, which then is going to heighten your experience of the game.
Exactly. It's incredibly unsettling, and it's amazing. But another thing I wanted to talk about was there's also on your map, there's like, because you're exploring like pretty mundane buildings, like there's apartment buildings, some doors will be unlocked, some won't. You know, you have the whole schematic, and there will be some doors that you'll see on your map that are just like cemented over
Oh, well,
in
that's
the
relaxing.
building. And there's just this idea of like this building has been constantly changing and reshaping itself. And now I'm going to send you a couple pictures.
While you're doing that,
Thank you, Movie Magic Chris, for editing this
you're
bullshit
welcome.
out.
Silent Hill is also a really interesting example of a game using its limitations to its advantage. So Silent Hill 2, a lot of the game is spent wandering around like the streets of this town. But Silent Hill 2 was released on the PlayStation.
PlayStation 2.
It
Hill
was a
1.
super early PlayStation 2 game. But either way, the PlayStation 2 is not the most robust console and was not able to render the environments as far out as you would be able to see if you were actually wandering around in this like kind of sparsely, like not particularly dense town.
Yeah.
And so what they did is they introduced mist. They made the environment super foggy so that you couldn't see far enough for the rendering distance to become a problem. And in doing that, really made the aesthetic of that game. When people think of Silent Hill 2, they think about like this creeping fog that's stopping you from being able to see far enough to know if you're safe.
That's an interesting idea, because thinking back on Mass Effect 3, a thing they introduced to... They have the elevators that force that, but when you're on the Normandy, moving between the like war room and the bridge, you have to like go through a scanner, and there's always two like yeomen there who are talking, and it's different every time.
Yep.
And it's like, I'm glad they put in that conversational element, but I do sort of wish they had made a better mechanic going from, like, I'm running from the war room and now I have to stop and be still for a while. I feel like that was a piece of the game that frustrated me. I wish they had made that loading necessity a little cleaner.
Yeah, if they had found some different way of masking
Yeah, usually they just have you go through like smaller rooms and make the doors take a little longer, but whatever it was about that one, they needed more time.
Yeah.
Is a good enough solution, but
Chris, are these images loading for you properly?
Oh, yep. No, they definitely loaded properly.
Okay.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
All right, remind me what we're looking at.
We're looking at some Silent Hill
Silent Hill
stuff.
So
yeah, that's relaxing.
Yeah. So I never said or if I did say it was a soothing game, I should have.
You did not say it was a soothing game.
Okay, that
good.
goes
I'm
unsaid
glad.
that it's not a soothing game.
Because I like maybe it's soothing in relation to Resident Evil, but even then, I would never call Silent Hill soothing.
So, Dylan, do you wanna audio describe what we're looking at here?
I do.
So-
I do theatrical audio description.
go.
I can audio describe it for you.
Knock it out, Will.
All right. Just so you know, a theatrical audio description is describing the events or set of a play in a very clinical tone for people who are blind or low vision. All right. It appears to be a window, or where there was a large sliding window that has been newspapered over. The newspapers are water stained, and there is in either blood or a red spray paint, scrappy writing that reads, "There was a hole here, period. It's gone now." And the walls look to be water-stained concrete and with rusty things, and there's electrical cords hanging in front of the viewer, and it is just creepy as hell.
Yeah, it's really relaxing to look at.
I would need to be more familiar with the game to know if like this is an area you've been to already, and like now it's just changed and it's wrong, or if like this is your first time seeing it, but like that's still a very unnerving message to see.
That's not something that would be relaxing. There's also one more image that Dylan has sent us to
Yes,
haunt
so
our dreams.
I'll give context for this one before we get there. There are a couple other NPCs in Silent Hill, and you're not entirely sure which one gives you this letter, but someone leaves a letter for you to find and says to meet them at this place, and they found a way to help you get to the hotel, which is where James is trying to go. He thinks his dead wife is there.
And Will, would you like to work your movie magic?
Oh boy. All right. So we have another concrete wall. There is mold growing down from the top and some bluish plaster that is crumbling off. In that same child chicken scratch spray paint or blood, it says, "If you really want to see Mary, you should just all caps die. But you might be heading to a different place than Mary, period. James."
Don't
Zoinks.
much care for it. Don't mind telling you.
It's a very
It's effective.
Yeah.
I mean, it's shit like that. I just realized, am I allowed to swear?
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
yes.
Shit.
No, we earned the explicit tag on iTunes.
Great. I can't watch stuff like The Walking Dead or 28 Days Later or play games like that, but the world building is just so enticing to me. I've read so many Wikipedia articles on this stuff, and like shit like that is really appealing to me. It's very, very, messages spray painted on the walls with just enough information to draw you in and freak you out and make you want more. It's super appealing. I don't want to actually engage with it, but the world building that's really, really effective.
No,
It's
I
really
feel-
effective.
I feel you on that, Will. I've said this before on the podcast. I love having experienced the horror genre. I do not like the act of experiencing the horror genre.
It's
That's
funny. I
fair.
feel that same way about playwriting. I hate writing a play. Every time I start writing again, I go to my girlfriend and say, "Why have I done this? I hate this." Every time. I hate it. But once I have written the play, I'm like, I'm so glad I did this. This is so wonderful. It's like I'm told, after giving birth, a woman's body is flooded with hormones to make her forget the experience. And I have a very small, not really related version of that when I write a play.
Will, do you wanna send your chosen image to Dylan real quick?
Yeah.
Okay,
So
yeah.
I pulled up some images. Dylan, I don't know if you've played the game The Long Dark.
I have not.
I have
no.
not either.
So
I've heard of it. I've
let me
heard good
search.
things.
So The Long Dark is a Canadian game, and the basic idea of it is you are a sort of bush pilot, and your plane, there's a world electromagnetic event, and your plane crashes in the middle of the Canadian Arctic. And stylistically, it's sort of, I don't know, like...
It's giving me like kind of Dishonored vibes. It's got that same like
Yeah, I could
it's
see that.
painterly realistic.
Yeah, it's a very sort of, there's painter aspects, almost like a paper cut aspect to it, but it's, you know,
Oh, that's really pretty.
yeah, it's like
Yeah,
it's
I'm like,
the Canadian wilderness, and it's very expansive, it's very open, and it's the middle of the winter, and the idea is, you know, there is a narrative structure version you can play, but mostly it's just, it drops you in the middle of somewhere, and you have, based on the level of difficulty you've selected, it gives you a different loadout. But each time it's a different loadout of, you have, you know, this amount of gear or this amount of food, and then you just go. And you find and you look for things, and you can always see your breath in front of you. And based on how
I
cold it
love
is that
that.
day, you can see more or you can see less. And there'll be blizzards. And there's one of the most important things is there's no map. You have no
so
map.
Yes, good.
So you can,
Yes.
you know, I played a round once where I had found this house and it was full of stuff. And based on, each map has a different difficulty, but each map is also huge and they bleed into each other too. And so there's one where there's a town and gas stations and houses and stuff, and you can jump between them. But you have to be very careful because there's animals that they've sort of said, hey, in this world, the animals have gotten crazy too. So you have to constantly be looking out for wolves that are going to attack you. But I was playing one where it was slightly more open, but I'd found a house and there was a gun in the house. But it's kind of like The Last of Us, in that you're not guaranteed to find bullets anywhere either. And so I had one bullet and I left to go find bullets. And I had all these leathers tanning and stuff, and this house had been like set up, and I was following this ridge, and then a blizzard hit and I was lost. And I was just completely lost. And you can see, and there's trees and there's expansive things, but you can kind of pick out they give you enough landmarks that if you're really smart, you can do it. But it's similar to that staircase you described, Dylan, is that you start to doubt yourself because it's just this white wilderness that, like,
That's
am I going the right
exquisite.
way? And I'm following this ridge, but am I going the right way? And I just lost the house. The house was gone. It was just gone. It's the other thing it does is you have to build fires to warm yourself up and to cook and to melt snow and to purify water. But where a lot of games are going to make it so you can't walk into your fire, you can just walk into the fire, and then you're hurt. And then you have burns, and then you need to treat yourself, and you need to use these first aid kits you have, and your clothing starts to degrade, and you need to keep up your calorie count.
oh my god.
And within all of this, there's still this is very style. It's just beautiful.
What is this game called again? I need
It's
to
called
get this.
The Long Dark. It's a Canadian game. It's not that expensive. It's maybe $15 on Steam.
Okay.
I highly recommend it. The narrative is pretty nice. The narrative version is pretty good too. It's a similar. He's looking for his, I believe his ex-wife in the wilderness. But it's, it's super good. I've never gotten to the point where, you can pretty easily survive at the beginning. You're finding things and eating them, but slowly the map you're in, this area you're in, is running out of resources in this way. So you have to start fishing. You have to start hunting, and you have to start curing deer gut to make fishing line, and then you have to start being able to cook this fish and make your own clothing, because at a certain point you can't find any more clothing and it's going to degrade enough and you can't repair it anymore. And a lot of the things you do, a lot of them have very slim success ratings. So you might try to start a fire with this last match, this last book, and there's only a 15% chance it's going to start.
That anecdote you told about the house is so good, because not only are they setting up a narrative of like, this was a place where someone was, and
Yeah.
someone was here before you,
Yeah.
surviving in the way that you have to. Now they're gone. It's building this, like, not necessarily a story, but like there's a narrative there that makes the world feel more alive.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
then also, in getting lost in that blizzard, the mechanics of the game created a new story for you.
Yeah.
In that place. That's so cool. I love that.
And the crazy thing is, based on the temperature, your experience of the various days, your experience is different. Yeah, there's blizzards, they're going to block your view, that are going to trap you in a place. But then there's also some days, to get to a different place, you need to go across the ice. But some days that ice is solid, some days that ice is not.
Oh, it's so
and then
cool.
suddenly you're in the water. And
man.
you don't actually, basically suddenly the game, it'll be like thin ice, watch out. And then suddenly it'll freeze, everything will stop, and you sort of go blue, and then you're on the shore, and now you're clothing is soaked and your body temperature is rapidly dropping, and you got to get back somewhere wherever it is, and you got to dry off.
Oh my god.
It's a great game. I highly recommend it. I had to with all the pictures I have on my computer sort of started to move slower and not have the power for games, and so you want a good engine, which I assume you guys both have, to be able to get a great experience.
It looks like it's also on PS4, so that might be the direction I take.
Yeah,
that sounds
I highly recommend it, and it's just
I have two things
beautiful.
to say.
Yeah.
Okay, one, this sounds amazing, and I really enjoy everything you just said. Two, this game sounds infinitely more stressful than my time with Silent Hill 2.
It is, especially because, with the idea that these wolves are just going to attack you, or there's bears too. I sort of shot myself in the foot in a way of where I would be playing, a lot of, when I would play games on my computer I'd be sitting in the living room with my roommate. He's playing Bloodborne. He's playing, a lot of Destiny 2 on the PS4, the TV, and I'm sitting in a chair next to him playing a game on my computer off of Steam. And so I'd be playing it, but I'd have the sound off because there's not a lot of sound engagement you need with the game, and because I don't want to interrupt him. And so I couldn't hear when the wolves were coming, and so I'd be like hustling to get to a car, and then suddenly, boom, flash, there's a wolf there, and it's attacking me, and you just have to fight.
Whoopsies.
That also creates this thing where there's cars sort of scattered in between places that are sometimes open, sometimes locked, and you like turn around and there's a wolf running at you, and you can see it far enough away. It's like, do I have a flare? Can I scare it off? Do I have fire? Can I scare it off? No, better get to that car. And you're running to the car, and then you sit in the car. You're sitting in this car, and you're just watching this wolf circle, and it circles for a while before it goes away, and you have to kind of keep waiting to think and everything's real time.
Yeah. I was
Except
about to say, is there like menu management, or is that all like out in the?
You can sleep. To skip time, or you can sort of pass time and like play solitaire, I think is their mechanic. But everything else is real time. Your calories are reducing, your tiredness is increasing, your thirst is increasing, and you have to then go through and like pick what are you going to eat, and your food is also spoiling in real time too.
Oh man, there's a lot of games recently that have been playing in that like survival resource management kind of space.
Yeah.
This sounds the most fun out of any of those that I've come across.
It's
Yeah,
super
that's
fun.
fair.
It's super fun, and again, I can't stress enough. It's just so beautifully put together in the design of it. It's this very, very artistic, very impressionist way.
I sent another image to talk about, but I honestly feel like that's a pretty good like high note to end on.
Yeah, I had two that were super on brand, but you know what? No, I think we're good.
Let's leave it with that. That was rad. Thank you all for listening to this week's episode of Backstage Gaming. Thank you, Will, for being a guest. It was super fun to have you. And
Hey, thank you for having me on. It's been a real pleasure.
Yeah.
I don't have a ton of engagement with video games just because my parents forbid them as a child, but it's fun to talk about the ones that I've discovered and really loved.
yeah.
Well, this is also a theater podcast, so
Yes,
I think
exactly.
you brought that in spades.
Yeah. So thank you one more time. Do check out Brick of Chicago on Instagram. Give them a follow. It's really relaxing. It's a delightful thing to see.
I will say it's funny to hear you refer to it as they, because it really is just me.
I'm aware that came out of my mouth. I was like, hang on, no, that's entirely Will.
No, because when I like do tours, I have a little form asking people how they found the page and things, and it's funny to see like friends and family members will buy tickets and be like, oh, Will is a friend, he told me about it. It's like it's just me running this too. It's the whole
You can write
enterprise
down,
is just
you told me to come.
it's just me.
Give Brick of Chicago a follow. If you're in the Chicago area, definitely go on one of the tours. I'll try to, now that I actually have a job that gives me weekends free, I'll try to make my way to one at some point soon. But yeah, thank you for listening. As always, you can find us on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, wherever you get your podcasts, really. If you like what we're doing, leave an iTunes review, leave a rating, tell us what you think, tell your friends, tell your family, tell your local brick enthusiast. I assume there must be one in every city.
There are. I actually have a lot of internet friends in various cities who are brick enthusiasts there. There's 2 people in Greenville, South Carolina who are brick enthusiasts.
Well, there you go.
I know, it's wild.
And As always, you can find us at our website, bsgpod.com. That's where we keep all of our episodes if you don't want to bother with like a podcatcher. It's also got a contact form if you want to reach out. It's got bios about me and Dylan. Give the site a look if you feel so inclined.
If you want to check us out on social media, you can find us on Facebook, our Twitter. Our handle is at BSG_cast. And you can also find us on YouTube. And if you like what we talk about, you want to talk about other stuff in Silent Hill 2 that I might not have mentioned, you want to talk about games that you think utilize space in a cool way, whatever, use the hashtag BSGPod.
Share photos of bricks from around your town with the hashtag BSGPod, I guess.
Yes, please do.
We'll send them to Will.
Yeah,
Are you guys on Instagram?
We are. I do very little with it because I'm not
same.
good at using Instagram.
Well, I'm just somewhere for me, because I'll post about this on Bricks.
Sweet.
And just somewhere to send people.
Yeah, absolutely.
Huge thanks to our friend Brennan French for the key art he has provided us with. If you like it, you should check out his work at brennan-french.squarespace.com. That is BRENNEN-French.squarespace.com. You can also check him out on Instagram at instagram.com/BrennanFrenchArts.
One more big thank you to our friend BioQuery for the use of our theme song, Sound Radio Volume 1 Instrumentality. He's a fantastic musician. He's working on a whole bunch of different production projects. He's got an EP out called Posthuman Angst. He's also got an EP that he produced of a bunch of hip-hop artists from around the country called Links Volume 1, and you can find all of that by going to Spotify and searching BioQuery, that's BIOQUERY, or by heading to BioQuery, no, that's not how those websites are laid out, by heading to soundcloud.com/BioQuery. And one more time, thank you to all of our patrons at patreon.com/BSGpod. If you like what we do, if you want to throw some money our way to help us improve the production value of this podcast, make new shows, just sort of keep doing what we're doing and making it better, head over there, see what patron rewards look good to you, consider helping us out that way. We appreciate every single one of you who has done that already. That's all I got. Will, any last minute comments?
No, once again, thanks so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Fantastic to have you. And I guess that'll do it for us this time. We'll talk to you again next week, everybody. Goodbye.
Goodbye now.
Bye.
Bye.
Farts.